Cheri. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. And how is it over there?
Yeah, good. So you're down in Melbourne and I'm up here in Newcastle. It's a bit overcast today. What's the weather like down there?
Cold. It's totally cold. I'm freezing. I have to drop off my kids in the morning and my fingers are freezing.
Oh, it is nice though to have the kids sort of back in their little school routine though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's very good. They're excited. And my son was just couldn't wait to go back. I think I was not the greatest teacher, maybe.
Oh, I'm sure you were fine. I'm sure you were fine. All right, so we're here today to have a little chat about our brand new book called Chasing Rainbows. And the funny thing is, we haven't got a copy of the book yet.
That's okay. We've got illustrations to show.
Yes, yeah. So it's good, and but it's coming. It's definitely coming. But that doesn't mean we can't start talking about this book because we've spent quite a while together trying to get this book ready for it to be printed, which I hope it's probably being printed while we're talking actually, and hopefully we'll have a copy soon. But yeah, anyway, so I got a few questions I'd like to ask you today, and and I believe you have a few questions to ask me.
Yes, I do. I have questions, and I think I'll start because you're the writer. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Now, everyone has a story, and as a writer, you share your stories with everyone. When was your moment that you decided to write and share?
Now, that's a very good question because a lot of authors would say, I've been writing stories and making handmade books since I was 4 or 5 years old. But that's not my story. I actually disliked writing as a child. And so, yeah, I didn't like it at all. Even into high school, really disliked it. And so it wasn't until I'd long gone to university, studied being a teacher, that I really started to discover books because I was a reluctant reader growing up as well. And so the power of reading and writing in a creative way didn't do anything for me back then. And look, if you said back to me back then I'd be an author one day, I'd just like, yeah, as if. Anyway, yeah, so teaching is when I discovered the power of books, and I was mainly teaching on upper primary, and so I was with mainly year 5 and year 6 kids for most of my career, and I loved them coming into the classroom after school and after lunch, the big lunch break, and they'd lay on the floor and I'd read aloud to them. And we were reading chapter books, and we're reading a chapter at a time. In fact, we were reading Andy Griffith's Just Tricking series, which Andy wasn't that big, but that back then like he is now. But I adored him, and I absolutely loved reading his work out aloud. That's the first moment I feel like I was storytelling, but it was someone else's story. But I just loved the process of getting into those stories and giving them to the kids. Then so that's one key moment where I think it did start. Then the next big key moment in my life was when my kids were starting to discover books themselves. So when they were, 2, 3 years old, and I was getting given books as gifts. And then my daughter started doing ballet lessons, and so we were visiting the public library beside the ballet class. And that's when I went, hang on a minute, some of these books are not that good. I can do that. Surely I can do that. And I'd given up teaching by this stage. And so I thought, surely with all my experience of children and how children learn and reading and whatever, I could make books myself. So it started from there. And that's when I started really falling in love with words and language. And because I read lots and lots of books with Lara, my daughter, at the time, I really realised the power of language and sounds, and it started there. Yeah, so what is she now? She's nearly 12. So yeah, about 10 years ago, I really started discovering the power of language. Yeah.
And you do it well, so that's good.
I try.
All right, now let's get on to the books. Where did the idea come from for Chasing Rainbows?
Now that's another story linked with my daughter, actually. She was in kindergarten by this stage, so I'd been writing for about 2 years at this stage, and she had to do a speech for kindergarten as part of the curriculum, and she came home and said, Mum, I want to do a speech on rainbows. And I went, great, we can't just talk about the colours, let's do a little bit of research together. So we, did the Google thing and looked at a couple of books that I had here, and that's when I discovered rainbows were round. And I went, oh, it was one of those massive aha moments of going, oh, kids don't know rainbows are round. Everyone draws them, with the semicircle. And went, oh, there's an idea there. So, yeah. And funny thing was, she won her class part of that public speaking competition that year, but then was too shy then she was too shy to compete at the school level, so she never did, but which surprised me because she's quite a little talker now, and when she was in year 4 won the whole competition and represents the school now public speaking. So I find it funny that kindergarten she was too scared to get on the stage, and by year 4 she's beaten all the kids. So that's so it was researching a kindergarten speech that really started the whole thing.
Oh, that's good. Well, I think she's like you.
Probably.
It's good. I'm terrible at public speaking sometimes. Sometimes I'm okay, but sometimes not. Now, my next question is, what's your writing process?
It varies from book to book, but the first thing is when the idea sort of pops in your head, it's just getting it out of your head, because you may not be able to do anything with it at that time. You could be in the car, you could be supervising your children at soccer training. Our book, No Baths Week, that idea came in the middle of a writing workshop I was doing on a completely different style of writing. And so I remember scribbling the idea for that book down in the middle of a writing course I was doing linked with education writing. So you never know when the ideas are going to come. So I either type them quickly in the notes app on my phone, or I might open up a document or even a piece of paper, get the idea down, and whatever hits you first, then I'll let it bubble away for a while until I've got time to spend some time on it. That could be a day, that could be a week, it could be 3 months, just depends. Then I may need to do some research based on what the topic is. Like my book Dandelions, I had to research the life cycle of the dandelion plant. Iola's family tree, I had to do some research about how to map a family tree and how to sort of lay it out. But with our book, No Baths Week, there was no research because it was just a child having fun in the backyard. So I was okay. I didn't need to do it with that one. Then I might start a Pinterest board, a secret Pinterest board with images of what comes in my head, what the character might look like, what are the activities they're doing. So I have heaps of secret Pinterest boards. Then I'll write the first draft, and it's usually pretty rubbish. And then but I love it. I love getting that first draft down. I love it. It's because you just do it. You don't think about the story. You don't think about structure. You just write the story. And it's the second draft that I really start thinking about, well, how do I structure this so it fits picture book format, and think about, things linked with that. And then I'll do a third draft, and then once I'm happy with it, I'll start putting it through my writing groups. I've got a couple of different writing groups, and start getting feedback. Once I've a bit polished, I'll send it to a professional independent editor to get some feedback, and then there'll be a massive rewrite from that. And then once I've done that and I'm happy, I'll start getting feedback from publishers. So that's the process for me.
Oh, that's all right. So during those processes, what's your favorite part of that process?
First draft. Yeah. I don't like editing. First draft, there's no editing. You just put it down. And no one's watching. Yeah, it's raw. It's organic. It's all the fun bits, because often you have to take bits out later on because they're not working with the story, but you don't have to worry about any of that. The first time you just dump it all down. And I hate editing after a writing group has given me feedback, because you've got to try and work out, well, what feedback do I want to listen to and what feedback do I not want to listen to, and what's the good bits and what's not. And then you've got to then weave that back into a rewrite, and it can get messy and you can get confused, and at the end of that you can often lose the essence of the story. So it's that first draft. Love it.
First draft. That is pretty special, that one. Now we have two characters in our stories, Sam and Ruby. Are Sam and Ruby based on children you know, and what about their names? Because they weren't Sam and Ruby before.
No, they weren't. They weren't. So I had a bit of obsession when I was naming these characters with a name that had an X in it. So Sam was Xavier, and Ruby was Sophie. And I just like the name Sophie. I often use shortlisted names from when I was naming my children now as character names. And and so in No Baths Week, we've got Ben and Bandit. Ben, my child Aiden was nearly called Benjamin. Very, very close. Yeah, very close. So now because I'm not having any more children, my characters get called by some of the names, that I saved from, and when I hear a name that I like, I've got a little tiny notebook with character names in it. So when I hear a name I like, I just pop it in there. And then when I get a new book, I pull that book out and I go through all the names and see what sort of jumps out at me for that particular next book. So no, I mean, my children, I've got a son and a daughter, and so have you, and my children are in exactly the same order as the children in the book. I don't remember intentionally doing that, making Sam the older of the two. It was a very unconscious thing to do. So I really don't know. I did want to do a boy and a girl because I didn't want this book to be a girly book. Maybe that's why Sam's the main character and is older, because I wanted this book to be very gender neutral. I don't want the world to think only girls like rainbows, because it's a very lovely scientific thing for boys and girls to look at. So I wanted to be very gender neutral, and I feel like the book is gender neutral, especially in the way you've done colours. And then we had a name change. So it was fairly late in the process, wasn't it? The whole book was sketched up, and you were starting to add colour. And our publisher said to me, think about a name change, because maybe Xavier is a bit tricky for the readers to say. And I went, yes, you are right, because you can't sound it out. So I thought, right, I really like the single consonant and a two-consonant name, Sam and Ruby. So I started going through that name book of mine and making combinations. And then what do you do when you name a character? You Google it to see what comes up. And so I found out a couple of sets of the names I had picked out were nappy brands in America or TV shows in other countries. And so I kept going and making combos of names until nothing came up, and it was unique. So that, and Ruby, the cover and all the colours of the cover were fairly finalised by this stage. And the colour of the umbrella, I'll just hold it up. The colour of the umbrella is maroon, a maroni colour, which is my absolute favourite colour. And that's where the name Ruby came from, the umbrella.
Wow. There you go. It came from the umbrella. Because when I got an update on the manuscript, all of a sudden the names had changed. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
The names changed.
You don't have to ask the illustrator whether we can change names.
Okay, change. That's fine. If they think that's Sam and Ruby, that's fine with me. Okay, I've got one last question here. Who is Cheri mentioned in the dedication?
Yes. So I'll just hold up the dedication page. And I've got it in a folder, so I'm trying to make it not shiny. It says, in memory of Cheri, an unforgettable girl who showers the world daily with love, giggles, purple glitter, and rainbows. So when this story was written, little Cheri was 7 years old. She was in my son's class. She was in year 2 here in New South Wales. And she passed that year. And she was obsessed with rainbows, absolutely obsessed with rainbows. And so I wanted to do, her mother asked me to write a book about rainbows, but I was happy to do that in an organic way. I didn't want to set out on a mission to do a book about rains, which is not this book. It's obviously been triggered by my daughter's speech. And I didn't want to do a book about grief either, because I didn't have the experience to write about grief from a personal experience at that time. So I couldn't do that either. So I thought, I can do this. And her mother found out I was doing a rainbow book and said, oh my goodness, Kerry used to love drawing rainbows. Can you put a picture of hers in the book? And so we did, didn't we? We snuck one in there, but she'd never know it was there. So I'm going to just quickly show, even though we're not allowed to really probably show the inside of the book yet, but on this double spread, there
it is.
There it is.
It's right there.
So clever Cheri, by special request from me, has scanned in a photo of Kiraleigh's artwork and has beautifully popped it on that page. So it blends in with the look of the book, but it has a special little message or symbolic meaning as well. Yeah.
It's a special connection, and I was happy to do it. It was perfect. It was a beautiful rainbow, and it's good to.
And it does. It looks like Ruby's done it. And Ruby, I would say Ruby's about 4 years. No, she wouldn't be 5. She'd be about 4. Kiralee, when she did that picture, probably was about 4 or 5 years old. So and she had brown hair, not curly like Ruby, but she had brown hair too. So there's lots of little connections you can make. All right, let's move on. Let me have a chat to you about a few things linked with the illustration process, because the book's absolutely beautiful. It's full of colour, bursting with colour, and the illustration process is just as important in making picture books as the writing, and can take longer. But sometimes the writing takes a while to get those 500 words or less right as well. But you've got sort of a shorter amount of time, and it's quite intensive project for
I think
Illustrator.
you've got a block of time to get things done.
Get it done. But when we say block, we're talking it could be 6 months, 3 months, 5 months. But it's still long time, big hours to get it done, to meet deadlines. Because by the time the illustrator has the book, the publisher already has it booked in to get printed, and publicity starting to be planned. So poor illustrators are on a bit of a tighter deadline, because authors write the story before publisher picks it up, and any rewrites after that is done, but the illustration can keep going while we're doing some rewrites. All right, so tell us, Cheri, a little bit about yourself and your illustration journey up to this point. When did you decide to become an illustrator, or have you always been one?
Well, I've always been illustrating, but little kids always illustrate all the time. They're drawing pictures, but mine, when I wanted to become an illustrator, was probably around when I was 15. I was flipping through this teen magazine, as you do when you're teens, and I was in Japan at the time, so drawing pictures had become my communication tool in a way, because I did have that language barrier. Anyways, by then
when you say language barrier, talk to us about that.
Well, I moved to Japan when I was 10, and I didn't know a word of Japanese. So I had to learn Japanese and go to a Japanese school and adopt the culture in that way, which was fine. It's actually the fastest way to learn a language. Just be thrown into the deep end.
There you go.
There you go. Go. If you need to communicate, learn how to talk.
That's right.
I'll do that. But you're always going to have something there, just a little barrier there. But during those years, I did draw a lot, just to communicate. This is how I feel, or happy, or something. Anyways, when I was 15, I was going through this magazine, and it was that day I actually saw the illustration that was supporting the editorial. I was like, who did this? Is this a job? Do people actually go out and draw pictures? Like, that was the first time I actually noticed that people actually drew pictures for a living. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to do that. That's me. I want to do that. That's all I want to do. And since then, I've just kind of tried to go in that, path, studied, and I did have to wait 2 years to just save money to go to school, but I did that, went to school, and then my first job as an illustrator was in a theater company in Japan, painting the backdrops. It was great. I had lots of fun. I did a lot of murals, a lot of backdrops, and then then I came here, and then I started really putting my portfolio together to do editorials. So I went from big scale to small scale. And yeah, and then I got my first children's book in manuscript in 2012. Yeah.
Wow. You've been drawing hard ever since. Yeah. Wow. So Chasing Rainbows, what number picture book is that for you?
That would be number 6.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, good on you. Well done. It's hard. It's a hard industry, but as you say, you've just got to put your head down. You've got to do it. Yeah, that's right. Keep going. All right. So next question. So when you did get the manuscript for Chasing Rainbows from our publisher, Big Sky Publishing, how'd you feel when you first read it? Because people may not know, illustrators don't have to accept to illustrate every manuscript they're asked to. So what made you say yes to Chasing Rainbows?
I love rainbows, just like really anybody. And I like how it had a scientific touch to it, where you're actually showing how rainbows are sort of made, or what they really look like. And I thought that was a good one. And when the big reveal comes, what rainbows actually look like, I thought, I want to do that spread. That's all I wanted to do. I want to do that spread.
Good. And I needed the illustrator to know. Yeah, and I needed the illustrator to nail that spread, and and I'm not even going to show it today. It's the spread. it's the moment. So yeah,
I think that was the most difficult spread, though. Like, I was thinking of all the other spreads while I was like drawing out all the other rafts. I was like, what is this spread going to look like? How am I going to show this spread? It has to be, I don't know how to do it. At first it was like, I don't know how to do it. but then the ideas started coming in. I was like, okay, all right, let's just simplify this for a second. And then I got the idea, and I was like, okay, I hope they like this.
Yeah, no, I loved it. And I think too, take the pressure. You got to take the pressure off yourself as an illustrator, because I from my understanding of illustrators, if you put too much pressure on yourself, then it doesn't come out in a natural way. It comes out sort of more forced. And oh, good. Interesting that the one that's the big reveal was the one that you probably spent the most time on in your head.
In my head, yeah. As I was doing all the other paintings, I was still thinking about that particular spread of how am I going to do this? How's this going to fit into the story? And because most of the book is based in the backyard. We have a little bit of inside the house, but it was mostly based in the backyard with these 2 children trying to chase the rainbow and catch it and do all sorts of things, and it's great. But I was thinking about constantly.
Yeah, well, I can't wait for everybody to look at that spread when the book comes out. All right, so designing Sam and Ruby, we were talking about Sam and Ruby earlier and where the idea for their characters came from. What about you? An illustrator gets to pick what they look like, their hair colour, because an author in picture books doesn't describe any of that. And so I had a little picture of what they look like in my head, but I don't get asked to tell you that. You get to start from scratch and make them look however you like. So what made you decide on hairstyles and skin tones and what they're wearing? And
well, this is a team effort. Sometimes the publisher does have the writer kind of give a picture of what they want in a character. I've had that before. Like, there were specific points that they wanted to point out with characters, like they have to have blonde hair or they have to have blue eyes. I'm like, okay, I'll just keep that in mind, and then I just plan around that. With Sam and Ruby, I did get a few requests from the publisher, from Big Sky, saying we want something a little bit more diverse, which is fine, a diverse family. So I'm thinking, okay, what kind of families do I know? And I know a lot of mixed families. I come from a mixed family. I'm a mixed family. I'm half Japanese, half American, and my descendants are Irish and all that. So I was thinking, let's mix it up a little bit. And even the publishers had sent me a few photos of these children that they know, which were very mixed as well. So I thought, let's go upon that. So their background, actually, their mother, in my head, it's not in the story, but their mother is actually from India, but studied in Australia, and she's a doctor. So that's why she's not in the story. You don't see her. She's too busy saving people's lives at hospitals. And their dad is a helicopter operator, and he's very Irish. I actually have an Irish friend. He's so hilarious. And I thought, oh, you know, they do like rainbows over there. I think they have a lot of rainbow stories. So I'm thinking, oh, yes, that'll be a good, like, you know, a little mix of culture there. And that's how Sam and Ruby came about. And my children are the models of most of my children books, kids, you know, they're always the models. They're always running around, you know, making the biggest mess in the house, and doing the most weird and interesting games, and they come up with stories and tell it to me, and I go, wow, you guys are amazing. But yes, so they are my mom.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Yeah, because I actually do see your children in these kids, actually. Yeah, but isn't that funny? Because I did write the story with no mum. I don't have an idea at all of mum in this story, and it's very interesting listening to you talk about mum, that as the illustrator, mum did come to you even though she's not in the text. Mum never came to me. That's why, and I don't need two parents in this story. One parent's plenty. So it's interesting.
Well,
I also feel like
in the background. She was nearly in the background. I was sketching up things, and I'm thinking, oh, she could be in the background making people, you know, snacks and dinners, which I felt like I always do. Like, I'm always in the background making snacks and dinners. But then I thought, you know what? This woman's going to be a doctor.
Yes, that's right. You know, dads can do snacks too. And Dad does do some snacks in this story, actually, doesn't he? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, in his uniform. He's probably just come home from work. Quick, feed the kids. All right. So what mediums did you use in the illustration process?
This one was mainly acrylic. So stretch paper, did the acrylic painting. It was very traditional. But the rainbows were digital because I tried many times and it was scary to especially, I think I tried on the first spread. I was making rainbow. I was going, this isn't working. Like, I'm going to ruin all my spreads with these rainbows. I'm like, oh, and that'll be terrible. I know they're going to say something about the rainbows. So
I can't imagine being an illustrator having to get the rainbow the same on every single page, because the rainbow's in a lot of pages, not all of them, but in a lot. Yeah, but having that rainbow exactly the same every single time would just be almost impossible.
It's impossible. And they're not the same. They come in different shapes and sizes while they're creating these rainbows. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to ruin this whole spread, and it's just going to be a total headache just trying to fix it up digitally. So I thought, I'll leave out the rainbows. I'll do everything first, and I'm going to digitally do the rainbows.
Oh, thank goodness for technology.
Yeah, but then I was thinking rainbows also look very magical in the sky. And I thought it would work that way in some sort, because it kind of looks unreal when you look out the window. It's like all of a sudden there's a big, you know, arc of a window, a rainbow, and you're going like, wow. How's it made?
They're magical. Well, they're magical. That's right. And then the stories.
In the rainbow digitally.
Just magic. They just appear. Oh dear. And my last question for you before we finish up here: do you want to share any fun stories or any disaster stories of the process? Sort of trying to keep it real for everybody, that it's not a perfect process that goes perfect the first time around. So, any dramas?
Perfect. Well, the rainbows for one. I was like, oh, how am I going to make these rainbows on almost every spread? I was thinking. But there was another one. It was the cover. And it's where Ruby's holding the umbrella, and I've got water droplets coming down the umbrella. And yeah. Now, when you're doing it traditionally and you've got all this, the whole page painted all nice and beautiful and ready to go, and you just have that one little element to just finish it off, which were the droplets from the water, I was like, if I stuff this up, I'm gonna have to do this again. I was very nervous in doing those droplets, but it worked out. It worked out.
And what about cover design? Was that the first design that came to you, or did you go through several designs before you settled on that one?
Usually I give the publisher and you a few designs to go.
Because I only ever saw that one.
Oh, right. So,
and I loved it.
I think with this one I had two. Now, this is a rough, or actually just a sketch, so you actually can't see what it looks like, but you see. These are the ones I would send to the publisher.
Wow.
They're very vague. You can't even see it. And then they'll go, oh, can you sketch it up for me? And then I'd actually sketch it up, and I'd make the two versions. So that was that version that you have there now. Yep. But there was also another version, which was that one.
Wow, isn't it interesting? I like the way they give you a bit of feedback just during this sketching part of the process before the colour, so that you're not wasting your time and all your materials on a design that ends up not being chosen. So that's a nice part of the process. Get a bit of feedback.
Well, yeah, it is good. They usually want me to do the cover first, so I try to get the cover out and then the thumbnails. But there have been times where I had finished the cover, but I wasn't happy with it.
Yep.
And with one of the books that I had done for them, I go, I have another cover idea. And this is the finished art, but can you just look at this idea? So I'd sent it. And they go, okay, let's go with that one. So I'm like, we got to get this done.
Yeah.
Well, I was a lot happier with that cover. Sometimes if something doesn't work with you, you're thinking through the process. There are, like, sometimes I look back on pages that I wanted to do differently, or there was something not there that, I just don't like looking at those pages. That's in past, like, projects I've done editorial for. Yeah.
But I've heard many illustrators say that. They go, the book's finished, but there's one thing I wish I could go and fix. And I often go as the author, I don't want to know, don't show me, don't tell me, because to me it's beautiful. And I think all illustrators, and I'm sure authors also go, I wish I could change that word. That one word's just not quite right, but yeah. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you for chatting with me today about our book. It's quite interesting hearing.
Delightful.
Yeah, hearing both sides.
I'm so excited that this book is going out very soon.
It is. I know. Well, here it is here, Chasing Rainbows. It is scheduled to come out in the first week of August this year. And we're doing lots of preparation to make sure that it's all ready to go out in the world and fly around. Spring's coming as well. Perfect timing. Book Week has been moved back into October. And so, it'll be a great time to celebrate warmer weather, get out of the house where we'll have less restrictions, celebrate spring and rainbows, and celebrate reading with kids who love our book.
That's right. Go chase those rainbows.
Yeah, go chase those rainbows. Thank you, Cheri.
Thank you, Katrina.
I look forward to seeing our book hardcover. No worries. See ya.